telling the story of the journey, and it's a slide that we often...
I am joined today by Roddy Martin, Managing Director for Accenture Supply Chain Strategy. Hello, Roddy.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome back. I want to have a conversation with you, and it's in a sense a 10 years after discussion about demand-driven, because a decade ago it was all the rage and everybody thought we were right on the verge of that happening. Where are we now on that journey?
It's certainly been an exciting and perhaps not as quite as short a journey as what we thought it would be. At AMR Research, now Gartner, we were intrigued by what P&G and others were doing around demand-driven. And it's obviously much easier for consumer-driven companies who sell to a buyer on the shelf or in a product form to associate with demand-driven. We're way down the road. I mean, you're seeing big industrial manufacturers who are also internalizing demand-driven as their fundamental end-to-end supply chain strategy. It hasn't been easy, and partly because companies have vested really heavily in traditional transactional ERP and planning infrastructure. The problem is that that's been largely inside-out focused, order to cash, right? So coming from planning, manufacturing, and then pushing product out and selling it. The volatility of demand, the volatility of the market, risks, events in the marketplace like tsunamis, etc., have really taught us that an inside-out supply chain is not as agile as a demand-sensing supply chain where we have visibility of where the inventory is and able to respond and shape demand. It also has allowed to take companies a lot of cost out of companies' working capital, because when I push inventory into the system, I may have 200-300 days worth of inventory if I'm a pharmaceutical company. I may have 60-80 days worth of inventory as a consumer goods company. That's working capital. And if it happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and it expires, then we land up with waste. So the journey's on. It's taken longer than required, longer than we thought it would take. I think that the companies that have really made a move, in other words, there are lots of examples of companies who have made a lot of progress in demand-driven. I'd say a common characteristic is leadership-driven. The leaders have stood up and made points like Procter & Gamble's 2 moments of truth, where the product is always available when I say it's available, and I understand why buyers are choosing and using my products. I think those were profound comments at the time. But to make the mental model transition from manufacturing push to demand pull is not trivial, because as we've seen companies move through these stages of capability where they build projects, they build functional excellence, then they start operating as end-to-end processes. That's a multi-year journey.
It feels like a point on the horizon that keeps receding, because we talk about demand-driven, but what constitutes demand has changed a little bit, I guess, in the last 10 years. We keep hearing it's become more volatile, it's become more unpredictable. The arrival of the omni-channel makes it more difficult than ever. We have social media, we have big data, we have all this stuff that just makes demand, again, that receding point on the horizon. Is it more difficult to assess what demand is in order to let that drive our supply chains?
Well, I think there's some very exciting developments. And I mean, here we are at the Kinaxis user conference and we're talking about control towers. I think the whole cloud-based control tower is a very exciting opportunity to really flip the switch on how we use enabling technology and how we now start to integrate people, process, and technology in demand-driven. Why? Because demand-driven is not within the 4 walls of an organization. I've got contract manufacturers, I have suppliers. I want visibility into what they're providing. I want to make sure that I have reliable and predictable supply. Visibility. On the demand side, demand changes quickly. I don't want redundancy, I don't want latency in the visibility of that changing in demand. And that's also outside the 4 walls of the organization. There's the example of Merck and Walmart sharing pollen data so they can move their inventories and have inventory at the right place at the right time. Well, this is the control tower. And I think the beauty of the whole theory of control towers is the fact that it's inside and outside of the 4 walls of the organization. It allows us to connect to structured and unstructured data. It's process orientated, it's end to end. And I think most exciting is the fact that it's not necessarily just about the technology. It's the organization to support the control tower. It's the processes to support the control tower. So at Accenture, we use the metaphor of an architectural model that has visibility, analytics, and execution. And so what companies are really grappling with, and we heard it in many of the presentations here at Kinaxis, is we simply don't have end-to-end visibility. I can't collaborate if I don't know where my inventory is. I can't collaborate if I only see demand changes literally days, weeks, hours after it happens. And I think that's the big value of a control tower. Now, what I will say is that control tower is not just a technology investment. And I think the mistake that I see a lot of companies making is that they're rushing into these control tower initiatives as if they were the next ERP system or the next planning system, and that is not the case. There are process improvements, there's organization changes, there's a lot of dirty data. Part of the big problem of visibility is the fact that we've got way too much data, but it's not necessarily contextually correct, it's not clean data, and so therefore in an end-to-end way we battle to make contextually correct decisions and the right trade-offs.
Yeah, it does seem like people take that control tower concept and consider it only as technology. They think of it as just being a rebranding of the management dashboard. They think of looking at a screen with a bunch of graphs and figures and lights all over it, and that's their control tower.
Right.
So they're not looking at it correctly, correct? Now, you've also told me that the term is not even viewed favorably in Europe. They don't like that. Why not?
Well, I think in North America we associate with the fact that we're a big geography. And a control tower makes a lot of sense. Well, whereas in Europe, where you've got lots of smaller countries, whose control tower is going to be the controlling factor in the end-to-end supply chain? So they do tend to react a little differently to the term control tower. And I think we have to respect the fact that there are so many smaller markets, and the geography, demographics are all very different in Europe to what they are in North America.
Okay, so there you go with that nirvana of end-to-end supply chain visibility that everybody's dying to achieve. Some companies claim they've got it or they're close to it, but I'm wondering typically where are the gaps? Where does it fail? And where do companies have to be paying most attention to in order to actually achieve that?
So I love telling the story of a journey, and it's a slide that we often use at the executive level in Accenture, and that is if you take the 3 layers of visibility, analytics and execution. Let's say, for example, we have a value hypothesis that says if we improved our on-time in full performance by 20%, this is what we could do to our margins, or this is what we could do to our revenues. So let's go and analyze which of the visibility points are missing. Where are the gaps in visibility? Is it a process? Is it redundancy in data? Is it inaccurate data? But let's not just put in a whole layer of visibility and be all dressed up with visibility and not understand how our processes are going to leverage that. So find the critical points of visibility. Now, what that may allow us to do is to run our sales and operations planning process better, or collaborate with the dealer because we've now got visibility into their inventory. So we go up to the execution layer. Now we execute planning better. Well, now that we're executing planning better, we start to say, well, could we segment the dealers or the distributors in a different way? So now we go back down to the analytics layer. Let's analyze how each of these dealers are performing. And as we analyze each dealer, we suddenly discover, well, there's some more visibility that we actually need. So we go back down to the visibility layer and we institute 10 more critical points of visibility. That allows us to go and execute sales and operations planning in a demand-driven way. The point that I'm trying to illustrate here is I've just taken you through a journey of some technology, some process improvements, a lot of analytics, some execution using our existing ERP systems, and of course, don't forget change management, because somebody has to reskill the organization. This is a new set of skills. Bringing big data insights into the supply chain is not a traditional transactional approach to analytics.
Such a wide universe you describe. It's hard to believe that there'd be any one individual within the organization that owns that process. It's just too big for one person.
Well, and you know what? That is the reason why the business leadership team is taking ownership. If you look at the companies that have been successful, the Samsungs, the Apples, the Procter & Gambles, the Unilevers of the world, they're characterized by strong top-down leadership. The leaders have a clear vision of what they're trying to achieve. Even though they may not be a stage 4 or a 5 capability, they understand they're at 2, the vision is at 4, but they're moving the organization's capabilities towards a 4. So you cannot get away from the fact that these companies are galvanized by a leader that understands the capabilities and what constitutes success? What does good look like? Why are we trying to get to demand driven? Well, because we want to eliminate stockouts. We want to improve our on-time in full performance, or we want to launch products in the marketplace, or we want to get into emerging markets. All of that's about visibility, collaboration, analytics, and execution. And this doesn't mean, I mean, one of the most important elements of this control tower is the fact that a control tower does not mean that the ERP systems are not important anymore. Of course they are. They are the fundamental engines of the enterprise. The problem is we need this overarching end-to-end process layer, which I think for the first time through the cloud is really a reality.
All right. I'm very optimistic talking to you, Roddy, that we actually might have been making progress 10 years in. I don't know. Let's talk again in 10 years and see where we are.
I really do think we've made progress. Yeah. I think that the companies are thinking differently about end-to-end. I can remember when we started the concept back in the early AMR days, the big industrial manufacturers said, you know, you don't understand our company. We don't sell toothpaste on a shelf. We sell, you know, big machines. So I think that we're getting to the point where industry as a whole understands that end-to-end is important.
Great talking to you as always. Thank you so much, Roddy.
Thanks, Bob.
I've been speaking with Roddy Martin of Accenture. Thank you very much for watching.